Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and I'm not sure this episode will really count as doomy, and that's okay because, well, you know, we visit outside of Doom. It's a garden as well of Doom. But this week we have a new guest entering. His name is Chris Morehouse. He has a master's from the University of Pittsburgh in economic development and African affairs. He's also a deacon in the Presbyterian Church, and he's a writer and author. And we're going to talk about African proverbs and their relationship and how they probably influence, I would say almost certainly, all of the Abrahamic religions, probably most notably Judeo-Christian sayings and proverbs, but he's the expert, not me. We'll figure it out. So, Chris, welcome into the show. Should I call you Deacon Chris?
Oh, no, just Chris is fine. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Do appreciate it.
All right. Well, you're very welcome. So you're in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Now, I don't know if that's your place of origin or just your place of residence, but how does a boy from Shepherdstown, West Virginia, and end up studying African development at the University of Pittsburgh while going into a ministry? I don't know if that's the proper term for it, and then going from there. What's your origin story?
Thank you. A good question. As a boy growing up in suburban Philadelphia, I remember, I think it was about age 13, I ordered records. Remember those? On Teach Yourself Swahili. I was interested in African development from an early age. I still remember how to greet an elder, shikamo mzee. And I'm in a Swahili language club at my workplace. But and over time, I selected a path. I was going to be like a Peace Corps or USAID type person. So I began a program of study with a master's in public and international affairs with a focus on economic development in Africa. And while in Pittsburgh, I met people from Nigeria, Tanzania, Mali, other places, and the whole world opened up for me. And to try to understand the cultures better, I began collecting books of African proverbs. And so I've been collecting these proverbs for over 30 years. They stayed with us every single move. Tons of other stuff got thrown out. These things stayed. I'd go and consult them periodically. So My life took a different turn. That's great. I'm fine with that. But this led to the publication of this book. When about 7 or 8 years ago, I came across a series of books called the Parallel Sayings. You may or may not have heard of them. They were mostly issued by Seastone Press about 30 years ago, comparing the great faith traditions on things like forgiveness and compassion. And there's one, the Parallel Sayings of Jesus and Moses. They're intertwined traditions, but the wonderful thing about that volume is every time Jesus says, "You've heard it said, but I say," the Jewish response is, "Well, we did say." And there are volumes on the Parallel Sayings of Jesus and Muhammad, Krishna, Lao-Tzu, and Buddha, and they didn't have an African volume. And so somehow these two ideas got meshed together, and I thought, as far as I can tell, there's nothing else quite like this out there. Archbishop Desmond Tutu issued a book in the early 90s, an African prayer book, with prayers and poems and parables and some proverbs, but not compared to Bible verses. So it's just sort of comparing the wisdom of Africa with what many in the West have grown up with in terms of familiar teachings, and to see that, I see those same ideas expressed in an African idiom. It just sort of revives. That's similar. Author Brian McLaren talks about, if you're able to recognize a teaching in another tradition that's similar to one in your own tradition, you've begun to build a bridge. And bridge building, I think, could be an important activity today.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and the interesting thing is whether it's archaeology, history, alternative archaeology, alternative history, whether it's Graham Hancock's There Was a Super Culture, whether it was the Maya or Atlantis or whatever, whether you're Von Daniken and it was the aliens who came down. What all of they have in common is that there was so much in common. There is so much in common throughout history and throughout cultures. It's funny, it's not funny, but it's interesting that you point out that Judeo-Christian is always intertwined as related. I'm not really sure that they're as related as we like to pretend that they are, other than the proximity in geography and sort of, passing of a baton sort of time, but, almost like involved.
Understood.
I'm not even sure that it's, I'm not even sure that, I think it's less close between Judaism and Christianity than Greek mythology is to Roman mythology. I think it's maybe closer to Egypt to Greek, or, Babylonian to Israelite, but, when Yahweh was just a storm god, not Jehovah. Anyway, this is just me talking, but there is one thing that does seem to be in common, and I am not a race baiter at all, but I try to be objective, but it definitely seems like out of Africa, a lot of people sort of want to sort of cut off, like out of Africa, goodbye. The one-way door, it's closed. And that just simply isn't the case, because a lot of these things, whether you're talking about Thor wielding the hammer or, Odin losing his eye, or, I know Egypt is part of Africa, but it's sort of a different culture. Horus and his eye, and spirit twins that made their way all the way here to North and South America. Snakes and serpents being part of water and chaos, and even in some cases hoarding gems, and, sort of being, what's the word when something can be both good, evil, or neutral, but not chaotic. They exercise free will, sort of like some category of jinn. All of that is in Africa too. Where hyenas are in Africa, well, there's werewolves where there's wolves. the vampiric creatures are in Africa. I mean, it's all there, and it migrated out of Africa along with it, including astrology, astronomy, but because they're not necessarily different things until recently.
Can I give you an example of what I'm talking about?
Please.
Have you ever been in a church or other house of worship with that poster on the Golden Rule in different traditions? Right. There's a version of do unto others in all the major faith traditions. The Jewish one, for example, expressed by Hillel, is that which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go study. Just beautiful. It's an expression of do unto others. I don't know why if these posters, next time you see that poster, look, chances are you will not find the African version. And I may have missed a few, but I found at least 7 African expressions of the Golden Rule. And there's a Malagasy version from Madagascar. If you know what hurts yourself, you know what hurts others.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Golden Rule. That's do unto others. According to and I used about 30 some African collaborators who I asked, is this really a proverb in your culture? Although I used my compilations of proverbs and other sources. Is this a proverb in your culture? What's the context? For example, is it used with children? And are there any translation issues that would help deepen our understanding of English? And one of my Malagasy language collaborators, Melody Ramanandro, their names are so musical, it filled in, helped enlighten me on a couple of those things. She said that proverb is used with children, and the word that gets translated into English in the version that I found, if you know what hurts others, means pinch in Malagasy. So when you put those two together, I don't know about you, but I hear a mother's voice. Don't pinch somebody. You know what a pinch feels like, right?
Sure do.
Right? It is still, somehow the proverbs are profound and practical at the same time. And my collaborators tell me in many cases they're still in use. They're still being used with children, and they distill down to short phrases, great teachings that are universal.
I'd like to avoid something.
The African expressions of these ideas are so often overlooked.
Yeah, and I think even just saying the African is almost a trap, because people treat Africa like it's a country as opposed to a gigantic continent with tons of different cultures and languages. And in your book, by the way, we haven't said the title of your book. What's the title of your book, and where can people find it?
Thank you. Legacy, Wisdom of African Traditions in the Bible. And you can find it, it's on Amazon. Legacy, Wisdom of African Traditions in the Bible by Chris Morehouse. It's available at barnesandnoble.com or my publisher's online bookstore at iuniverse.com.
Well, it seems like that would make a very timely gift for Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, and really any other religious, type of holiday where you're trying to teach things. But one of the things I noticed in your book is that you had quotes in different languages. You've already mentioned Swahili. I saw Yoruba. I'm pretty sure I saw. I can't pronounce the language. Zoso, is that how it's pronounced?
Xhosa, I think. I want to learn languages so badly. Yeah, there's some of that. There's isiZulu, which has clicks. Yeah, but you're quite right. Africa, I think, has about 800 different languages, like 4 or 5 major language families. Malagasy, which I just mentioned, is distantly related to Hawaiian. Yoruba is one of Africa's tonal languages. Like in Chinese, if you say ma or ma, it can mean mother or horse, or So tonal languages scare me.
I'm glad you said horse. I thought you were going somewhere else.
I'm enthralled by the sound of Yoruba, but I'm intimidated by it. I love the Yoruba collaborators for the book.
Oh, it's sort of on a tangent.
It's Bantu, but tons of Arabic influence.
It's sort of on a tangent, but I understand that there's some languages that are actually spoken with clicks, like one
yes,
clicks of your tongue, and that's a real thing. And the reason why it sings to me in particular is because my favorite book of all time is The Descent, which is sort of a horror thriller book, but the part of it is that there are peoples that speak in clicks, and later that was revisited in a different book called The Terror, with people in the Arctic. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I understand one to be accurate and the other probably not to be. But what language is that that's sort of click-based?
There's a cluster in Southern Africa. They're believed to be the oldest human language. It may have been used by our distant ancestors. Zulu uses them, Xhosa, Tswana, and some others. They just sort of all adopted that. In Zulu, there are 3 basic clicks, I understand. There's like a click, there's a palatal, and then there are variations. You can nasalize them. It gets very complex very quickly.
Yeah, you could see how that is something that probably came from our pre-verbal ancestors, and stuck with it, because it's probably a very, one, you don't learn language overnight, or develop it, but 2, it's very effective when you're doing things like trying to organize without necessarily giving away your position or what you're trying to do. Make natural sort of insect type sounds when you're trying to, stalk a warthog or a Cape buffalo or something. For hunting and other purposes, or if you're worried that you're encountering another colony of, humans that are either rivals or you're not sure what they are, and so you want to coordinate and get a little recon, or maybe do a little retreat instead of meeting what might be the troll people versus what might be friendly people.
Yeah, one hypothesis is just as you say, that it originated in hunting. We don't really know, but
I mean, it sounds like it. I remember the movie The Longest Day, that, they had the clicks for, 1 if you're friendly, 2 if you're not, or, when they did the paratrooping and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, you still see like sort of hand and basic signals, and, well, when I say you see, I mean that I see it in media and I read it in books, but like special forces and SWAT tactics, that kind of thing. I see you've got something going on in the back there.
It's okay.
You're being invaded by rival tribes as well?
So just getting back to the variety of language, one of the language families, Afro-Asiatic, in the Horn of Africa, includes some languages like Amharic that are related to Hebrew and Arabic.
Yeah.
There's Semitic languages. So there's a whole, it's such a variety. And I consciously tried to look at proverbs from all regions of Africa, and I tried very carefully to be sensitive to issues of language as well, and differences in meaning that could enrich our understanding of English. So, and that's why I consciously, I'm from outside these traditions. I didn't grow up with these proverbs. I've only been collecting them, for 30 years, so I'm going to need some help. And I recruited these essentially co-authors, and I couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah, no, I think that was wise to pick from around the continent, because I've had on Andy from the History of Africa on 2 or 3 times. It's been a while, but in the very first show, I basically asked him just to rehash what he said in like episode 1 of his podcast, which was covering the linguistics of Africa, and he pointed out that there's more genetic diversity. I can't remember if he said East Africa or West Africa there right now than there is in the rest of the world combined. So naturally there'd be, and then like most dummies out there, I thought there was one kind of pygmy. No, there's like 3 dozen different, genetically diverse different types of pygmies out there, which I don't even know if that's a word that's allowed to be used anymore. I truly have no idea. But the point being is that there's just so many different cultures, nations, tribes, cultures, states, whatever. I don't know what, clans, whatever we want to call it, but I don't know what they call themselves. And that's probably not a monolith either. that you have to do justice. You have to try, and you have to do a sampling, and at least do the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, and maybe one in the middle, just just to at least do an honest start. Let's get you back on your path as opposed to my little sidetracks. Sure. So you were on the golden rule and how it was sort of mirrored in so many other cultures. Are there other similarities? Or is it like a 10 Commandments type of situation, or even worse, a Hammurabi's Code? Or do we have any of that?
There are books available on African religion, right, and mythic characters. Heroic figures in African belief systems. So this book is not that.
Right.
It's not about the legal codes that evolve. It's about looking at proverbs from a wide array of cultures that reminded me of something in the Bible. Another example is the Ovambo of Namibia in Southwest Africa, just northwest of South Africa, have a simple, beautiful proverb: "Eyes see me too." Eyes see me too. That is the same idea as seeing the beam in your own eye and not focusing on the mote in somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
See me too. It's all about having the humility necessary for any kind of self-transformation. Look at yourself, and that's like the hardest thing, right? So that's what inspired me, and that is one of the proverbs that's been with me for 30 years. I keep going back to it. There are others. There are several versions of loving one's enemy. The Wolof in Senegal have a proverb: "If there is cause to hate someone, the cause for love has just begun." Which is it blows my mind. It is so astonishing to see everyone as a potential friend, to undertake the hard work of loving one another as Jesus asked us to do. But I can't think of another more vivid expression of loving your enemy than that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think what it's doing is it's undermining the assumption of the enemy part.
Exactly. Right. So it's looking for similarities like that. It works on the on the distaff side too, on the vices. There's on vengeance. The Bakongo have a proverb: "To seek revenge is often to sacrifice oneself." Right? I mean, how that is just so profound. To align yourself with the goal of vengeance is to commit yourself to becoming a monster, and it can mean your own destruction. So I paired that with vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, i.e. not yours, right? Vengeance is mine, so not for you. The Swahili in East Africa have a beautiful proverb: "Hatred burns its preserver," which is just so beautiful. If you feed your hatred, it will destroy you.
Yeah, these are all.
I've heard with anyone who. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. These proverbs are. I mean, we've heard the same proverbs just in different wording. Probably wherever we go in whatever culture. It just so happens that these are probably older. They're probably to the tune of hundreds of well, I don't know, but tens of thousands of years older.
It's hard to know. I mean, there are issues with dating proverbs, because it's an oral tradition, right?
Oh yeah.
You can't go look at publication date. I mean, there are Oxford dictionaries of quotations. There are ways of seeing the earliest occurrence of saying in English, but it's still really challenging to get at some of the oldest proverbs, the oldest efforts to compile proverbs, and in some cases compare to Bible verses, were done in the 1830s by the first Yoruba bishop in the Anglican Church. That's kind of as far back as you can go. There is some, there's like an indirect way of dating some proverbs. There are a wide number of variations on "you reap what you sow," right? That's just a universal idea.
Sure.
But some of them name specific crops that are New World crops.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, they must have evolved or emerged in the culture since that time.
Right. If you're talking about maize, you know that it's at least in North America or the Americas.
Right. It's like, you're right. So, you can make efforts here and there, and a folklorist probably would do a better job of dating, the proverbs and how far back they go. But sure, in some cases, they probably do go back very far. Even if, though, it's hard to know which direction the influence goes, right? But even if, they represent, in some cases, an African expression of a Christian idea. Sometimes they do it in such a pithy, vivid way. It's refreshing. It's sort of revived because you get so used to the way we've learned all these verses by rote. You kind of take them for granted. A good example is there's a wonderful proverb from Ethiopia. Again, Amharic, a Semitic language. Singing hallelujah everywhere does not prove piety. I love that. Now, Ethiopia has a homegrown, ancient Christian African tradition, right? So this idea aligns with Jesus' teaching. Don't pray in private. So it may well reflect the Christian influence in Ethiopia, but it's still such a vivid way of conveying that idea.
Well, it also sounds a little bit like the lady doth protest too much. If you're too loud, maybe you have something to maybe you're overcompensating.
Right. If it's showy, the motivation is probably not totally pure.
Yeah, piety is usually, we forget, but it's supposed to be sort of humble, private, humility. Yes. It's hard to sort of imagine. When you, you look at most, especially the Catholic churches, and they're these beautiful, ornate, even the mosques and some of the temples. Even the stained glass. It's beautiful. It's like anything other than, symbolism. And I'm sure at some point there was like a arms race and who's going to look more beautiful, because everyone wants to be part of the beautiful crowd. But I don't, I'm no scholar, but I think that Jesus was sort of trying to say, listen, just hang out together and be good and pray, and you're good in my book. And somehow that turned into draw swords and conquer other lands. Not that he's the only, Godhead or prophet whose words were taken to as a call to arms, by any means.
Right. Totally understood. Religious historian Karen Armstrong has a great book on that very topic. But it's getting back to the showy piety. The Swahili have a similar proverb, but that clearly reflects the context of Islam. So there's a Muslim version of this too. It's the fear of God is not wearing a white turban. So it's not what you wear. It's not, your flowing robes we see in the marketplace or a shiny suit. It's not a special kind of hat. It's what's in your heart.
Right. It's not the performative nature of
exactly.
Yeah, and it's hard to say that in some cases because you have so many religious sects that are identified by their appearance, that they look a certain way. I mean, a lot of your more orthodox traits, sort of all black and white, big hats, long beards, that kind of thing. It's like, and then like that's supposed to indicate piety, and it probably is some sort of adherence, but at the same time, I mean, there are criminal syndicates and price gouging and all sorts of things that are also associated with those groups, as most colorfully indicated in the John Wick movies, which is probably mostly fictional, but I don't know. I mean, Mario Puzo seemed to have a pretty good, idea of how, the mafia, worked in and around, certain churches, and I hardly doubt that that's unique. Anyway, I know that's not what you want to talk about.
It's okay.
I have to bring a little doom into this. I mean, it's the brand. Understood. Okay. Well, you can bring the light. You can bring the light into our garden. Get those crepuscular rays coming through my swampy leaves.
What's interesting is that in the Bible, in Proverbs 8, there's a personification of wisdom. That's female, Lady Wisdom, and she says, "I have words of truth on my lips. I stand at the city gate." And it goes on, and she says, "Those who find me find life." That's some other things. "Those who fail to find me will harm themselves." In other words, you're going to learn the hard way, right?
And she survives today as Libra, Lady Justice.
Well, there you go. What's interesting is that a lot of the African proverbs I found reflect that sort of universal truth that your actions sort of rebound on you. That as I just pointed out, hatred burns its preserver, right? Mm-hmm. There's this Swahili proverb: "He who ridicules a deformed person becomes deformed himself." You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to learn the hard way. So there's just this common down to wisdom that's expressed in really surprising ways that can seep into your soul. So, Proverbs evolve to be memorable, particularly because in oral cultures they're used with children. That's how you raise children. So people, a friend of mine grew up in a cult in Kenya, was surrounded by these proverbs, and was able to have like a frame of reference, much as the Scripture provides for some folks in the West. So, Lady Wisdom still offers a warning to those who are dedicated to learning the hard way.
Rank speculation, but do you think that the adoption of Christianity throughout so much of Africa was because these proverbs and the teachings in the Bible were already so familiar?
That's an excellent question. It's really hard to say. There's a beautiful book, The History of Christianity in Africa by Elizabeth E.261, which is out of New Zealand, also about 30 years old. And she traces from ancient Christian sources in North Africa, and Nubia, Ethiopia, all the way through the missionary movements by Europeans in the 19th century to revival and missionary movements in the 1960s. And Karen Armstrong, as I've said, she finds Africa dominated by competing fundamentalisms, a Christian fundamentalism and a Muslim fundamentalism today. And so it's hard to know, it's hard to look at the relationship between these proverbs and the influence of religion today. And there are still vibrant traditional religions too. It's a very complex religious map, right? But all my African collaborators were like, "This is really great. This has never been done. So thank you so much." And my African reviewers on certain websites have also been, "Well, of course, this is something we should know." I presented at a church, and the response was like, this is great. We never knew this. Let's impress to Africa. I was like, as much as I would love to go, I think the people who need to hear this are here in this country.
I think, well, the U.S. And yeah, most of the audience is in the U.S. Though this week I went up by 3 listeners in Kazakhstan. So, I mean, they're...
Good to know.
Hey, listen, I'm happy to have any listeners, period, and to know that I went up by 3 in Kazakhstan, I mean, at least presupposes that I had one before. I guess not necessarily, but hey, thank you to those Kazakhstani listeners or people in Kazakhstan, and I hope that you're continuing to listen. And the rest of you stands, what are you waiting for? Get on board. So, except for Jeff Zikistan, which, if you've ever listened to Garden Views, that is the straw person country for the country that does everything evil and wrong for all the wrong reasons. I just call it Jeff Zikistan because my name is Jeff, and saying Zikistan is fun to me. So I know I could do Jeff Landia or whatever, but I've done Jeff Zikistan because that's just something silly I like to say. Not that it's silly as a meaning, just because it's fun for me. Anyway, I talk too much. I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is even the right answer, but you sort of touched on it before. Sort of around the world, there's a movement towards secularism. Atheism seems to be the most popular religion, but I'm not entirely sure that that's true. I just think people don't identify with an identifiable religion. There seems to be a lot of New Age, which, as far as I'm concerned, I say it every week. I should probably stop saying it. Seems to be very old agey. Is there? You were saying there's a traditional religions, and it's a complicated map in Africa, and I think that's what you're touching on. Is there movements, because movement would indicate one, to sort of a resurgence of your more traditional, and just out of ignorance, I'm going to guess that they were sort of animistic, shamanistic, everything has spirit type religions that we would call what I just call animistic, shamanistic, which, or we could just call them religions. Is that something that's going on? Because, I mean, these proverbs are not, don't require a godhead or a monotheistic God. And I could talk for days on how I don't actually believe there's a single monotheistic religion yet created. Probably a deacon in the Presbyterian Church doesn't want to cover that today.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I mean, there is no existing religion that we have where there's not at least other immortal beings with powers, which to me, that just means lesser gods. None of the gods could challenge Zeus, and none of the angels can challenge God, though in some versions, one did and became the devil in some versions, or got, cast asunder, sort of like the Titans did into Tartarus. But, if you have a devil, well, you're already on a pantheon. If you have a sacred Virgin Mary, who is divine, well, now you have a pantheon. If you have a Father, Son, and a Holy Spirit, I don't care how many times you try and slice that one. There's plenty of trinities, but I've been into lots of churches, and I only see the image of Christ there on the cross. There are people saying Jesus. No one's saying, "Hey, Father," or there's no picture of Father, looking over at Jesus. Plus, you got all these angels, and with the angels come the demons. Well, those are immortal beings. They are more powerful than humans. And in Islam, you've got sort of the same thing, plus the jinn. To me, that's all polytheistic. You just have a more powerful, supposedly, Godhead who, we sort of give the out of, well, he gave us free will. I got issues with that story in Genesis too. I mean, basically say, you can do whatever you want on the tree of life, but not the tree of knowledge. So basically said, you can live forever, but you got to be dumbasses. I mean, which, so I can see the expression in your face. You are not happy with me right now. So
No, these are all different interesting ideas. You mentioned like polytheism. The Yoruba probably have the most well-known pantheon in the West. Orishas, the gods and goddesses, Yamaya, right? But inspired New World religions, Candomblé, Vodun, Santeria. But at the same time, the Yoruba have some of the most profound proverbs in the book. They have a peacemaker often receives a wound, which to me is just so profound, because peacemaking is this active effort to intervene and push yourself at risk. And to me that is the whole Easter story.
Well, you're right. I was just thinking that. Jesus got not just the cross, but and that's the thing. I think that Christianity was supposed to take us to an evolution of a kinder, gentler version of God, and a kinder, gentler version of the son sort of usurping the father or grandfather, which is sort of the root of all religions, but oftentimes violently, or by killing a serpent or something, a dragon or some other monster. And this was not that. This was by sacrifice. It was sort of, it's like the hero's journey, but the hero's journey isn't conquering someone. The hero's journey is sacrificing yourself. Not your twin brother, not some primordial cow, not a giant frost giant or whatever else, but yourself. And I'm going to make enemies here, but I sort of feel like Islam was a reaction to sort of take it back, to make it more like, God's mad, you better follow God or else, and you've got to agree to it. And that does not mean that everybody who is an adherent of Islam feels that way at all. In fact, I know they do not. I am painting with broad brushes and looking at very macro stuff, and I haven't studied these things beyond doing a stupid podcast for 5 years. So, I don't pretend to be a graduate student or anything like that. But I think I'm sort of seeing things with sort of like the eyes of babes, and I sort of think that, sort of Christianity sort of did it to himself, but Islam came before Christianity sort of did it to himself, or did they? I don't really know when it started becoming sort of a forced conversion. Proselytizing was cool kind of thing. People say there's a lot of theories and reasons behind anti-Semitism, but one of them, and probably not the main reason, but it probably doesn't help anything. And for anyone who doesn't know, I'm ethnically Jewish. I'm not a practicing Jew, but I'm ethnically Jewish. So I have some allowance to say this. We are not a religion of inclusion. We are a religion that's based on, God promised us an oral land contract, which every lawyer can tell you is unenforceable, for a spit of land, which was important then, but in the grand scheme of it, somehow it's still important, but it's a small spit of land, and leave us alone so we can study, pray, and argue about the scripture and come up with God's laws, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're not trying to convert you. In fact, if you want to convert to Judaism, it's like a 2 or 3 year ordeal. It's not an easy thing by any stretch. It's sort of religion of exclusion. Leave us alone. We don't want to bother. We'll be in the streams of commerce. In fact, we study, so we're smart, so we can, occupy, professions and give you good advice. But basically, get the blank out. Leave us alone. And I think that leaves a mark on one's neighbors to a certain, historically speaking. I have no idea how I got onto this strain of things. At some point I was talking about polytheism is everywhere and got onto that. But I think that maybe you could probably address Christianity, I think was supposed to be the evolution of the kinder, gentler passing of the torch from father to son, and making religion more of a thing about sacrifice and loving your neighbor, more communal. And at least in the U.S., a large swaths of Christian belief is the opposite. It's basically Crusader vision.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's the ideas that appeal to me are loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, welcoming the stranger, and there are African versions of all of those in this book. It's as another religious author, Jeff Niggers, pointed out, the kingdom of God is always at hand, and yet not yet. Right? It's always here, but not yet. And so, I sure hope we evolve toward kinder, gentler, but we have to admit we're not there yet. We say in church, have all been fed? No, there's more work to do. Getting back to the polytheism, theism, and monotheism, I wish I was looking for the African Jews. I was looking for Proverbs from the Falasha, but I could not find any. So if there's ever a volume 2, maybe I'll dive in. If any of your listeners know, please let me know.
Oh, and if you find anyone who wants to talk about the Beta Israelites or African Jewry, I'd love to. I have talked to a black Israelite, and all I can say is I did not know what the black Israelites were. I thought they were the Beta Israelis. And I'm extremely glad I talked to the black Israelites because I learned a lot, and it's a very interesting, school of thought. But I obviously I don't know many people who would subscribe to it. But I would love to hear about the Ethiopian and North African Jews. I mean, I imagine that the Jews in other parts of Africa are sort of sparse, but also don't have that, multi-millennia privity to them as well.
I've heard there's a cluster of Jews in Uganda, but that emerged in modern times. Not really sure how that happened, but
no, after Idi Amin, I'm not sure. After Entebbe, probably fewer.
I think it's been since then. I think they're still there, but anyway. So getting back to polytheism.
Yes.
My book is not that. I mean, there's wonderful, colorful stories about the eternal beings. This is not that. I mean, again, the Yoruba have this really amazing pantheon that coexists with some really profound insights. Another Yoruba proverb I want to get in is the wealth that enslaves is not wealth. Right? It's such a beautiful use of paradox, and it's a kind of poverty to be, in service to, and that accompanies all kinds of warnings in the Bible about beware of all forms of greed. So, and yet at the other extreme, there are African monotheisms that predated Christianity and Islam. You mentioned what you call the Pygmies, one ethnic group that falls under that is the Bambuti. They and other African traditional peoples have a vague sense of a monotheistic God that's distant, that may intervene occasionally. And some ethnic groups believe it's a little bit to be aware of, to be don't welcome interventions that could be very disruptive. But one common theme across the continent is a panentheism. God is in everything. This gets to the idea of Ubuntu, which is it literally means humanity, but it's more about the interdependence of people. I am because we are because I am. That's survived into African American English. But that's the idea that we are dependent on one another. Archbishop Tutu framed it this way: a person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs to a greater whole. The Malagasy that we talked about before have a similar concept called Fihabanana. They're sounding that lovely musical language. There's a Malagasy proverb that expresses this idea so beautifully. All who live under the sky are woven together like one big mat. And that is the same insight that some African American theologians have shared. I mean, compared to Dr. King referring to human beings as woven together in a single garment of destiny. Howard Thurman saying human life is one and all men are members of each other. Those ideas, I think, still have currency today. And we need to pay attention.
I agree. Absolutely. You were talking about some of the Proverbs. And actually, I want to, before I forget, and this is not even part of the topic of the show, but what is the difference between Presbyterianism and sort of Catholicism or other Protestantism?
Very good. I'm not sure I'm the best candidate to explain that, but it stands as a Reformed tradition, with origins back to Calvin and Knox, right? Some of whose theology is not greatly appreciated today. The ideas of predestination, for example, it's a little bit different from other Protestant, like the Episcopalian and Lutherans are somewhat closer to Catholicism in some ways. One thing that I learned in becoming or re-becoming a Presbyterian was that there's been in the Presbyterian tradition, yet if semper reformanda, always reforming, but always from the beginning there were Presbyterian thinkers who were open to science, believed in education, believed strongly in civil service, and that's me. That is who I am. So I'm very comfortable with this group. It's a very yeasty congregation doing many, many beautiful things. Just really talented, lovely people in this congregation.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. I'm sorry that was not really part of the agenda, but
and presbyter just means elder in Greek. So there's no copyright on the use of that term.
Yeah, no, I was telling you pre-production that I was reading some book. I couldn't even tell you what it was about, but it is probably like some Edward Rutherford book on the history of England or something in historical fiction, and they had people called presbyters, but there was no Presbyterian church yet. Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. I'm like eternally confused by things like that, even though it does make perfect sense. I mean, I loosely think that a lot of people in Scotland and Dutch, now the Netherlands, are Presbyterians, and William and Mary has something to do with the Orange Wars, and that's sort of all I got on that. So, right, I'm
just getting back to the idea of Ubuntu and everyone being woven together like one big mat. The Bible verse that there are several that you could think of when you think of the theme of unity, or interdependence. There's sheep not of this flock, for example. But the one that I use in the book is in Acts in the New Testament. Paul referred to God as the one in whom we live and move and have our being, which in turn is a Greek idea, as he says. To Greeks, as your poets say, the one in whom we live and move and have our being. But there's also this Christian idea that we're within God.
Oh yeah, I talk to a lot of people, and depending on who you're talking to, they'll say this is a Greek idea and this was invented by the Greeks. And sometimes, yes, it was. Other times, no, not necessarily. It's just that we in modernity have discovered it from the Greeks, and probably because they had more writing or better writing, or we still basically understand the language. But I mean, everything gets older. And this is completely adjacent and not related at all. But we were talking before about how you can't really place oral history as to when its age, but even regular history is constantly moving. And I'm not sure how accurate this story is because I can't peer review it because I'm not even in the peer group that could. But I saw an article that they found a butchered mastodon dated 130,000 years ago in the Americas, which is like 100,000 years before even the alternative theorists thought that people got to the Americas. I mean, it's slowly, it's been pushed back. Traditional science, basically acknowledges now 17 to 22,000 years, but this is 110,000 years before that, which, that's not a Pangea thing. There were no hominids when there was Pangea. I don't know what. I mean, the mastodons may have been a Pangea thing, but the Homo habilis or Homo erectus or Homo sapiens weren't. I mean, so did they sail across? Were there giant continents in between and lots of islands in between, so that it wasn't such a daunting thing for you to canoe? Did they have sails? I mean, all of this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, except to say everything keeps getting older until it stops. Now, my dream, of course, is that it ends with actually finding the same aliens that the Dogon said that met them, yes. the Mer people or whatever. But it probably won't be. It'll probably be something more equally cool to different people, but not to me. I want aliens. I mean, why am I doing a show called Garden of Doom if I don't want aliens? But yeah, everything's getting older. Everything's getting older all the time, and that's why you can't ever completely dismiss anyone's theories. But at the same time, I think we're in this age of too much information that it becomes a post-truth era, but a lot of things that we're told are truths don't always turn out to be the truth. And I'm not talking about science, because science is supposed to change and evolve. I'm just talking about truths, but which I think in its own way is a nice little segue back to your topic, which is old proverbs, which are universal, were universal truths then and remain universal truths now, as represented by every major religion and plenty of less major religions.
Right. You summed it up really well.
Well, that's good, except that I'm supposed to pass the baton to the guest, really.
You mentioned the Dogon. I looked in vain for a Dogon proverb, but they have such a cool cosmology that no one can quite explain. But I have one. I do have another from Mali, which is the Bambara of Mali have a proverb: "God provides for the blind vulture," which is just this beautiful natural companion to consider the birds of the air. It's just like I don't know how that proverb evolved. It's thousands of miles from the Holy Land. It's unlikely to reflect a Christian influence, but again, just a universal idea that God provides. Don't worry,
No, I think there's plenty of Christian. I mean, not being Christian, maybe I'm not authority on it, but I think there's definitely Christian ideals in there, in that God provides for even the weakest among us. I mean, a vulture, A, is ugly. B, birds rely on their sight, their sense of smell isn't exactly their
right. Exactly, that's it.
Not their strong suit. So I think that is pretty cool. Now God provides for the blind. One-winged vulture maybe is be a little bit good. Do you have any proverbs from the Ethiopian Jewry, or what might have evolved into the Ethiopian Jewry? Just because that's a little side.
I told you, I looked in vain. I mean, I have proverbs for the Amharic. They were predominantly Christian and have been for a long time.
What about Coptics? What about Coptic Christians? Which is actually that's I'd like to get a Coptic on the show to talk about that. It might be interesting. It might be just more of the same. I have no idea. But are there any sort of interesting proverbs that are sometimes you sort of see like crossroads. So like you would think a Christian church in Egypt might be sort of a crossroad between sort of the traditional African religions and Christianity.
It's a wonderful insight. The relationship between the Ethiopian Christians and the Abuna, in Egypt, is centuries old. I remember looking in vain for Coptic proverbs. Let me know when that show airs, because I'll be listening. I tried to get representation as far and wide as I could, but it's certainly not complete.
Unfortunately, I only knew personally as a friend one person who was Coptic Egyptian, I'm aware of anyway, and She died about, a decade ago. So my in was there. But listen, if there's anyone out there in the audience, know someone, I'm always looking for guests, and guests beget other guests. So yeah. And listen, you'd be helping this guest also. You'd be helping Chris Morehouse, who's an author. He might actually do something important with the knowledge, not just have a dopey podcast. So, or maybe not so dopey. All right. I've lost my train of thought as to things that I want to ask you. So I'm going to give you the road entirely right now for you to take back this show.
You mentioned that you had read some of the book. Was there anything that jumped out at you?
I mean, most
was surprising, or
well, mostly it was the familiarity with the concepts, and mostly the overlapping concepts. And that's why I really appreciated you putting the different languages, saying this was Yoruba, this was Swahili, this was, I'm sorry, I don't know most of the languages, and sometimes some of them I just can't pronounce. What you say is musical to me is too many syllables for my tongue to handle. I'm only first getting around to being able to say Kardashian, so it's I have trouble with developmental, so it's my tongue is not always my friend, which there's so many bad jokes in there somewhere. What was your methodology in studying this? I mean, did you travel the continent? Did you talk to authors or heads of churches?
I did not. I've not traveled. That's my bucket list is Ethiopia someday when I retire. Absolutely. I did not travel. I did not speak to heads of other churches. As I said, I started with compilations of Proverbs. One central one is Patrick Ibekwe, The Wit and Wisdom of Africa. He's from Nigeria and works in London. It's thousands, and he presents his sources in the back, and it's pretty extensive. And that was one I've had 30 years ago. And when I started this book, I went back through it and thought, "Oh, this reminds me of that. This reminds me of that." And then I expanded beyond these books and went to certain websites. I also consciously, because of the African influence in the diaspora, was intentional in looking at Proverbs from the New World, from Jamaica, Haiti, Guyana. And you mentioned dating, how do you date the Proverbs when it's oral culture? All of those could have been influenced by Christianity, obviously, because, just because of the history of colonization and slavery, unfortunately.
Obviously.
So I made intentional efforts to look at as many different groups as possible. And then I had them, not all the groups in the book, but the major ethnic groups, the Zulu, Yoruba, Swahili, Bakongo, groups from Mali and Senegal. I reached out. I said, would you be willing to help me on this book? And I got such a gracious and generous response, and people were thrilled. Here's some more Proverbs for you. Here's some more verses for you. And my publisher had limits on, original versus quoted content. So the whole premise of the book is a quoted proverb and a quoted verse. I had to have 5 original words for every quoted word. So I'm like, thank you, don't suggest too much. But and then I just organized it into 46 different themes. And I didn't select anything that was obviously an effort to indigenize or contextualize translation of the Bible. So I wanted these to be original Proverbs. There's a beautiful in the EZK book. Consider the tarantula; they toil not. Which was a translation effort to kind of indigenized the idea of, consider the birds of the air, and it's Tswana. It's a Tswana translation. So I try not to do that, and I
gotta admit, I've understood most of them. I do not understand that one.
Tarantulas just crouch and wait for their prey. They have enormous capacity to rest.
Right.
Don't worry. Okay. Yeah, and that was another thing. Things that proverbs that had two cultural references that would be too obscure to a Western reader. Like there was something about the significance of a white rooster that wouldn't be readily apparent to an American.
Well, now I need to know what's up with the white rooster.
I don't know.
Is it like a white whale? Is it like the white buffalo?
No, it wasn't that. It was something about the salience of seeing a white rooster in your village. I can't remember what it was. So, but there were if it wasn't, because all of the examples I'm giving you were like so vivid and so accessible and so practical. That's the value. If it required two or more steps to kind of understand and get there, then it's like, well, and I explained a little bit as much as I could in notes, but
I'm going to have to remember some of these when I do the show description. I'm going to have to remember, the steel tarantula, the blind vulture, the white rooster. I'm still not sure what I'm going to call the show. I'll probably just call it basically the Proverbs of Africa or something. I don't know, but is there something that I should have asked you that I didn't, or something that you wanted to impart that no question of mine has allowed you to get to?
Oh, lovely question. Just every step of this was a blessing. Every step was just so personally meaningful, and as I said, the outreach, the generosity and graciousness of my collaborators was just. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And people who found it seem to appreciate it. I'm still waiting for hate mail. I'm so kind of disappointed that I haven't gotten any.
Sometimes I understand because people ask me that, and I'm like, every now and then, but really not. And the only thing I can say is, I guess I'm not successful enough. It can't be all that good. I get a lot of praise, but like everyone else, probably half of it is from the same people, which is great. That's terrific. The thing that I have a fan, let alone fans, is sort of surreal. But yeah, I was expecting more badness. But what I'm wondering is, do you think this might open the door to more scholarship in this and related topics, either spearheaded by you or others through you? And the reason I say this is because your description of how the elders and the people in the know were so willing and generous with their time and knowledge with you is so different than what I hear. And frankly, to be honest with you, I thought it was mostly BS until I spoke to some indigenous people myself here in mostly North America, but I'm always hearing that, they don't share the secrets, and then also in Australia, they say the same thing, that the Aborigines, they don't share the secrets. They have to trust you and you have to learn the trust. But I came upon secret knowledge, and I'm usually like, yeah, it sounds like bullshit to me. That white guy trying to make him sound more important. It's not always a white guy, by the way. But it turns out it's true. Go ahead. Sorry.
Some of my collaborators offered like special knowledge that could benefit, and for example, a few said, "I have access to the National Library." So I'm like, "Oh, great! Please come help." And one said he had access to a royal family. Okay. And another woman said she had access to rural women. All of these are like keepers of the knowledge, right? So to all of them, I said, I'm so grateful for your help.
Right, that's beautiful. Because until I actually I haven't spoken to a ton of indigenous, scholars, folklorists, period. But I've spoken to a few, and the few that I spoke to, from authors to college professors, who are also often authors as well, they confirmed it. They confirmed we don't readily share our sacred knowledge. Sure. Now you can understand why. I mean, the Aboriginals in Oceania and the First Nations and Native Americans, in all of the Americas, whether it was purposeful or accidental, didn't exactly get a great introduction to Europeans. But neither did the Africans, they seem to be more, and I don't know what, if that's sort of a Siberian type of, culture kind of thing, or Asian kind of culture thing that came into things. Though I do remember way back when that you told me that there was a language, I think from Madagascar, that was closely related to Hawaiian, which
distantly, yeah.
But still,
they think that the Austronesian languages originated in Borneo, so some went east, some went west.
Yeah,
Madagascar is the furthest west they got.
Which again is, there you go. It's Egypt, not Egypt. It's Asia. I mean, it all goes through Asia one way or another. But we can always also hope that maybe somewhere in Madagascar someone made the trip over to the South Pacific and then made their way to the Americas, as so much fun myths are. We entertain those things here anyway, but I don't expect you to. But it is an interesting contrast to me in cultures, and I wonder if one was because of so many not decades, but tens of thousands of years of being on the move versus one that, not to say that people in Africa couldn't move and couldn't leave and come back and were mobile, but the mother culture that basically had some type of hominid, somewhere beyond primate for 7 million years, that maybe there is something like, we share.
I don't know why African wisdom traditions are so often overlooked. It's just bothered me. We started with the Golden Rule, and one of my sources says there are versions of the Golden Rule that grew like 21 faith traditions around the world. And that's pretty significant. When you look up in that book the endnotes and look at their sources, they also omit African traditions from their count. So it's more than 21. But I wish this were more often in the conversation about, there's a great storehouse of wisdom that's available today still.
Well, you're starting that conversation, or at least...
I sure hope so. I had someone tell me, this is like its own genre. There's nothing else quite like it.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing is voodoo and hoodoo and Santeria, and which, they all get bad raps, probably for the same reason that African religions, and culture gets ignored. I mean, and I'll say it, I think a lot of it is just plain old racism.
Yeah. African Americans were told this was demonic, right? And I'm told there are homeschooling curricula available today that claim slavery was a blessing in disguise, which is just a horrible way of erasing everything that came before.
Yeah, the mother of all disguises.
Right? So I don't know why, but I think there's a lot of value here that's been overlooked that I'd like to call a little bit more attention to.
Well, I think what you're doing, intentionally or not, is almost a mission. It's almost like a calling to
exactly right.
Open up this door, and once you open the door for spiritually, it opens the door to so much more. And I'm hoping that you do get good feedback and more collaboration and more information, even if some of it's out of your wheelhouse. You can find people who it's in their wheelhouse and, do more stuff. And maybe we can get a little bit more doomy, because I know that there's monsters and eschatology and bad guys in African lore. I know that much. I've talked to people about monsters and things like that. So, we can get We don't want all this love your neighbor stuff here. I mean, we want some, goblin snatching your children, as well. I mean, we need those universal things as well. Babies being eaten or whatever. So, all right. Any last thoughts? And I'm going to give you also, while you're pondering that, because I always get one gotcha question for the guests. It's always the same gotcha question. And that is, no, it's not a no, dear. It's just, what song would you like to be the outro, as long as it's not like more than 5 minutes and it's not Disney who will, copyright kill me?
Any African Mbira or Kora?
Yeah.
Mbira, M-B-I-R-A.
Hold on, I have to turn my computer back, my phone back on. I got to get into YouTube.
I know you've heard it. It's sometimes called a thumb piano.
Mbira?
Mbira, yeah. It's
M-B?
Or M-B-I-R-A.
R-A.
Mbira or Kora. There's a tradition of royal kora players in Mali, families that go back centuries, and it's a stringed instrument. It's delicate, gorgeous, like harp-like sound. That it is very, very complex. It was used in the Lift Me Up, by Rihanna. There's some kora in it. It's this delicate, contemplative, very spiritual music.
And kora is just C-O-R-A?
K-O-R-A.
K-O-R-A. I'm sorry. I was busy there looking at the Mbira, and most of them are long. Not too long, but I'll find something. That's fine. That's enough of a starting place. That's perfectly fair. I will find something, and hopefully something that sounds a little fun. But yeah. All right.
There's a sample from my audiobook I can send you.
Okay.
That is a little bit of Mbira, I think. It's beautiful. My publisher did a great job. It's available, by the way, print, audiobook, or ebook.
Right, and while you do, you can also send me what your publisher wrote about you and about the author, and any links, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely, will do.
So perfect.
My big ambition is to get the book translated into French, Portuguese, and Spanish, because if you've got English, French, Portuguese, that's like 95% of the official languages of Africa, the official European languages. And I got so far ahead of myself, so ambitious, that I did recruit some potential translators. A lovely Afro-Mexican lady in Mexico, a couple of French translators, and a Portuguese translator in Brazil. And to a person, they all said, this does not exist in my country.
Well, not to be competing with myself, because I don't think it's competing with myself necessarily, because it's a different genre, and there's already 3 million other podcasts out there. That's literally not an exaggeration. There's at least 3 million other podcasts. So, but I think maybe you should consider doing a podcast where you interview those people about their experience as being an African in Mexico. I think that would be fascinating, and likewise around the world, and you sort of, so even if it's premature to get them as translators, you at least foster that relationship and create some content and get your name out there, because I think that would be freaking fascinating too. I mean, I would love to talk to a Black Russian, not the drink, and I mean, I would love. I'd love to talk to a Jew in Peru. That rhymes, but I think that would. I just don't have the time, energy, or resources to do that. But I think that would be a fun little type of show, like perspectives on minorities in those countries that maybe are not minorities in other places. I don't know. Anyway, it's yours if you want it. Anyway, one more time, what's the name of the book? Where can they find it? And of course, it'll be in the show notes.
Legacy, Wisdom of African Traditions and the Bible by Chris Morehouse.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for your indulgence with my sort of meanderings and, trying to bring this into a less serious area. But I think that you acquitted yourself very well and then represented the topic beautifully. And I think it sounds like it's an important book that maybe everybody should check out, not just because they need to get to know Africa a little bit better, but maybe because they need to get to know humanity a little bit better. We're all basically the same. That's what Proverbs are. Proverbs are cliches. They're basically cliches. I was having a discussion with somebody about, what's the law? And I said the law is codified morality. And then I corrected myself. I'm like, really? I mean, that's what you think it should be, but it's not. It's codified philosophy, because that includes economic philosophies and things like that. It's codified philosophies because it's not always necessarily moral. And obviously law differs from place to place. There might be places, and whose morals. I mean, you can argue all day about theocracies and things like that. But anyway, so I do have these strange kind of conversations with people in my regular life as well, not just the podcast. So cause, effect, who knows?
Lovely. It was my pleasure entirely. Thank you for your patience and for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
Enjoyed it.
Pleasure meeting you. Look forward to getting some song choices and your other stuff. All right, folks. Thanks so much. Check out his book. Buy his book. Sounds like it makes a great gift to me. And you can give it to lots of other people. And while you're at it, especially if you're a new listener, subscribe to Garden of Doom. You get Garden of Doom, which is very varied and very eclectic. I think you got a taste of it today. Garden Views, which we tend to do more law, business, science, realpolitik, but same type of variety. And then GOD presents the Book of Black, which is me and professional wrestler PJ Black talking about GOD, Garden of Doom things with people in and around wrestling. And just dropped a show with EC3, really cool show. I just want to tell you that there were 2 macho men who wept on that show, and I'm not one of them. And just booked Bulletproof Blake Troop, who is not just a professional wrestler, but he's actually an MMA fighter and just won a world championship like literally just like 2 days ago, which I should probably date stamp. This is December 8th, so the show probably won't drop for 2 or 3 weeks. But so around December 6th or 5th, Bulletproof Blake Troop won an MMA world title. And somehow, like 3 days later, he's doing my little show where we're going to talk about, I don't know, the Roman Empire conspiracies or whatever it is he wants to talk about. But check out that stuff. You get them all for the price of free. So there you go. No Patreons, no Super Chats, nothing available. Even if you wanted to give me money, there's really no practical way to do so. All right. Thanks so much to our guests who's sitting there patiently waiting. Thanks to all of you listening, and you'll hear from us next week in one form or another.